Hello everyone, this is a response to Paul Doman's video in which he entitled, I Don't Have Morals. It's common for atheists to discuss morality usually in response to questions or statements made by believers, usually along the lines of the idea of how is it that atheists can have morals. If I understand the thesis of your video, it's that moral decisions can be broken down into the rational reasons behind them. And you gave some very good examples, and I like the breakdown, and I don't have an argument with any of the reasons that you give. But it puts forward the idea that morals, ethics, and values are somewhat objective, and that you can always break it down. And I'm not sure I think that the motivation behind them are in fact quite human, subjective, and even cultural. And you see this when you examine the tougher issues like abortion, stem cells, cloning, and flag burning. Simple examples: in the United States tends to be a little bit more patriotic than most other countries, so flag burning is a kind of a big deal. Yet in most other countries, probably they don't even concern themselves with flag burning at all, but in yet other countries they may make that even a more important issue. So I would just put forth the addendum that morality includes with it the motivation behind making moral decisions. So let's take your example of theft. I mostly, for me, like most people, I don't steal from people for no reason. And the way I break that down into a moral choice is that the biggest factor for me is when I steal from someone, I deprive them of that property. Right? So I feel bad about that, and that's a purely empathetic motivation on my part. And that is the primary reason why I don't steal from people. The other rational reasons are interesting. I might go to jail, or I might get caught and be perceived negatively and so on. But those reasons, I think, are negotiable, because I could simply be very good at theft. And so I could weigh that, I could sort of weigh my ability versus the penalty or something like that. So that would at that point it's just a sort of game theory thing where I just pick whichever one will yield the best return But for me, the really big problem is that if I steal from somebody, that's just taking away from somebody, and it's just pure empathy that prevents me from doing that. By empathy, I mean like the empathy you feel for pets or friends, family, whatever. So the other reasons are fine, but they have such a lower weight for me that they are just not the determining factor. So I don't actually disagree with your point. I think that morality just includes more. It includes the human element, the emotional element. And this I think we have to be very careful of as atheists. We can't reduce everything down to rationality. Even if we're atheists, we're also human. And that things do, the human side of us is a part of us. Everything is not an equation. We should try to stay away from being perceived as some cartoonish version of an atheist, like Spock from Star Trek or something like that. A purely logical person. Okay, but humans are emotional, and so are all atheists. So. Okay, so let's return then to the question of the believer. Why is the believer asking the atheist about their morality, or why are they questioning the morality of atheists? And I think it's fairly straightforward. You see, the believer very often has a set of rules that has been given to them that tells them what their morality is, like the Ten Commandments or something like that. So for the believer, they look at the atheists who don't believe in the Bible, like we reject the Bible, Quran, or whatever, and so they assume we don't have these rules, so we don't have these rules. We don't have a Ten Commandments, so we must be lacking morals. We don't have them, so and this is a kind of a common false dichotomy, a kind of error in reasoning, which is typical. But when you think about this, you realize this actually reveals more about the believer than it does about the atheist. All atheists have morals. We develop them one way or another from our experiences, from however we grow. We decide to follow the law or whatever. In the end, it all becomes our moral, ethical kind of base of who we are. But the believer has a hard time seeing how that process happens. We, as atheists, it simply happens. We live it, so we know where our morals come from. A believer can't see that is possible, or somehow misses the idea that this could happen, that a human can just simply develop or learn or grow their own morals without those rules. And I obviously I can't speak for all believers. I don't know this. I don't think this applies across the board, but it applies to a lot of believers. Certainly, this is where these questions are coming from, because they have an interesting situation in that their morals only come from the rules or from their priest or whatever. Their morals have been defined by their religion. And they look at us atheists and we have no religion. How can we have morals? And they don't complete the circle. They don't think about it and realize if you just look at it objectively, atheists have just the same amount of morals as anyone else. You can just measure it any way you like. Would an atheist save somebody from a burning building? Sure, why not? I don't know, why not? Do atheists steal? Apparently at a lower rate than non-atheists. But anyway, they don't complete the reasoning. They don't complete the circle. So in their mind, they just see this hole in the atheist philosophy of an atheist. So in fact, it's a reflection upon themselves, because they are actually fearful and worried about their own morality, because they think to themselves, if they didn't have those rules, then they wouldn't be moral. And very often this kind of case is often made by them. The believers will say, well, if I didn't have the Bible, I could just wake up and kill you tomorrow or something like that, because of something, and the morals are the only thing keeping them in check. And so your initial reaction to this is, wow, that's pretty scary. These believers just are, that close. They could just snap. It's only this tenuous grasp on their morality because they believe in the Ten Commandments or whatever that keeps them from really going off. But I think that this is it is just a fear, even on the case of the believers. Because if the believers just would shut off their religion and try to develop morality for themselves, I think they would be just as successful as any atheist. And a lot, even if we perceive they may have poor rationality or something like that, I think the emotional motivations would mostly save them. Anyways, those are just my thoughts. It was a very excellent video, and I think it's important that atheists discuss morality. You did a really good job. Thanks. I look forward to seeing more.